Hello and welcome to this episode of Challenge TV. Today we'll be discussing various topics regarding the current state of Russian politics and how the current COVID-19 pandemic is being handled in Russia. Speaking on this, I have with me Roman Kononenko. He is the secretary of the Central Committee of the Leninist Komsomol of the Russian Federation. So thanks so much for being here with me, Roman. I'll crack on with the first question. What is the current political situation in Russia in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic?
The current situation showed us that the market fundamentalism imposed in our economy is really vicious. The dismantling of applied science, which is the basis of the economy, and the best Soviet education, everything continues. The authorities do not want to abandon further so-called optimization of the medical sphere. For example, in recent years, our oncological morbidity has increased by 20%. According to the World Health Organization, Russia came out on top in Europe in terms of the spread of HIV. By the number of tuberculosis patients per 100,000 people, we are now in the same group with the African states of Mali and Rwanda. We have been 4 times surpassed by Japan, 8 times by Germany, and almost 20 times by the United States. But the Soviet Union was the first country in the world to stop the mass spread of this disease. Only since 2017, I have only these statistics, 42% of medical staff were laid off in our country. The authorities do not want to admit how hard the total reduction in the number of hospitals and clinics has come back to us when we faced this coronavirus epidemic. They are silent about the dangerous consequences of the total dependence of domestic pharmaceuticals on imports. The fact that against the backdrop of the raging infection, the pogrom of the Russian light industry had the most negative effect on the medical sphere. There was an acute shortage of protective masks in the beginning that had to be imported from abroad. There was simply no one to produce them in Russia. Operational testing of patients was difficult due to the lack of an elementary item, rubber nozzles for pipettes. Domestic manufacturers could not simply cover the need of medical institutions even for such elementary products. Such are the frankly shameful and, without exaggeration, monstrous realities generated by the system of wild capitalism, which reduces our economy to the level of a primitive raw materials appendage of imperialism. Against the backdrop of this growing crisis, sharp criticism of socioeconomic course being pursued in Russia is increasingly being heard from various sides. But only few dare to tell the truth. This is not just because of a dead-end socio-economic model, but a vicious capitalist path of development. As to the political situation, the political life has become really limited in the recent months because all kinds of protest activities are forbidden under pretext of COVID-19. Even going out in the street with a banner is forbidden because they are saying, okay, it is not a mass event, but you can attract mass media or you can attract pedestrians who will come and join. That's why they also forbid all types of protest activities. So we are really forced to move our political activities into the social media, into the internet, and are discovering new types of work like video conferencing, which was completely new for us before, because now we use it like really regularly, both on the nationwide level, in the party, both in the party and in the Komsomol.
That's great. I think it's the same situation here, really. We've moved a lot of our organizing online as well. It's the easiest and best way to kind of get in touch with people these days in the current situation. So what do Russian communists think about Putin's claims to have about having a vaccine for COVID-19 and the international skepticism?
Well, in this deplorable situation in the domestic healthcare, Vladimir Putin's announcement of the registered world's first vaccine against COVID-19 does not mean that Russia has pulled ahead in the race of manufacturers of vaccines against the coronavirus. It means that the government is actively using the coronavirus theme to gain political points. Truly, these points are only for internal use. Since outside Russia, the statements about the world's first vaccine are at least questioned. There are reasons for this. The Russian vaccine, by the standards of pharmacology, is a crude product and is not yet suitable for mass use. Such drugs are usually tested in 3 stages. The first takes place with the participation of dozens of people, the second with hundreds, and the third with thousands. Many pharmaceutical companies began trials of vaccines in March, April, and Russian research center, which is called Gamaleya Research Center, it only began vaccinating volunteers on June 17. So it is logical that in terms of pharmacology, the Western pharmaceutical companies are leading in this test race today. The desire of the Russian officials to cut corners by announcing the readiness of the vaccine immediately after the first phase of trials has already prompted cautionary comments. The Russian Association of Clinical Research Organizations in an open letter to the Minister of Health of Russia pointed to the obvious, quote, "At the moment, there is no data on the safety of the vaccine for the elderly. There is also no information on what the mass production of the vaccine will be. The desire to complete vaccine development is reminiscent of the heroic paradigm of the vaccine pioneers that no ethics committee would endorse today." End of quote. In other words, the widely advertised use of the vaccine among the population, which has already begun in September, is in fact taking place within the 3rd stage of clinical trials, which, moreover, as it turns out, will not be so large scale. That, on the one hand, will not violate the medical protocol, and on the other hand, it will allow the media to demonstrate the vaccination campaign that has begun. Concluding the above, we note that the creators of the Russian vaccine took quite a risky step in order to get ahead of the competition and give Vladimir Putin the opportunity to announce that Russia has developed the vaccine first. They really took much more cutting corners than big Western capitalist pharmaceutical companies. If the vaccine does show side effects, the consequences can be severe. However, until the 1st of January 2021, when the government promises to start the mass vaccination, there is still time for testing. But as for now, this vaccine shows to be working. Now they are vaccinating high-ranking officials and medical staff in most of the regions. There are some indications that those who have been vaccinated were infected with COVID-19 despite this, but this is because of the special mechanism of this vaccine, because it has 2 stages. You receive the first dose of vaccine, and in 3 weeks you have to receive the second dose. If you get infected in between these 2 doses, you are still vulnerable. So this is the vulnerability of this vaccine, but as for now, it shows the 92% effectiveness.
Yeah. So I know that there was changes to the constitution made earlier this year. What does this mean for Russian politics, and what's the stance of communists on this?
Well, the proposed amendments generally do not lead to rejection of presidential autocracy and oligarchic rule, and do not make Russia a social state. They do not ensure national security and genuine sovereignty. Under these conditions, the position of the communists on this constitution and the so-called all-Russian vote was based on specific conclusions and firm principles. The Communist Party didn't vote for the Yeltsin constitution imposed in 1993. That document was saturated with the blood of the defenders of the House of Soviets, a burn of war in Chechnya, with tears of the humiliated and roped people. It legitimized predatory privatization, opened the gateway to the pogrom in economics and medicine, science, culture, and education. All these years, only communists have persistently fought for the revision of the constitution on the basis of the main principle: power and property must belong to the people. When constitutional reform began, we immediately got involved, of course. The Communist Party was very active and proposed 108 amendments to the basic law. We suggested holding a wide discussion. In fact, the government ignored 15 key proposals aimed at decisively changing the vicious socio-economic course. The parliamentary majority of United Russia Party refused to support all our laws that improve the situation of working people. Amendments to the basic law, to our mind, cannot be adopted in a hurry. Our party already demanded that the Constitutional Assembly be convened, and we have introduced a draft law on its formation, because in the Constitution, in the current Constitution, there is a mention about the Constitutional Assembly. But still, the government decided not to go that way. They just proposed some amendments and went directly to voting. And they hastily dragged constitutional amendments through the State Duma, which is Russian parliament. And these amendments were immediately approved by the Council of Federations. This is the upper house of the parliament. Their approval was announced by the president of the country immediately, and in such circumstances, the 1st of July vote was rather of a ritual character. It did not have a status of a referendum. It did not fit the electoral law. All this once again exposed the falsity of bourgeois democracy. The so-called all-Russian vote was organized by the Central Election Commission according to a legally dubious procedure. Each specific amendment was not separately voted. The vote was only for or against all changes, and it was like in a bulk. Unlimited possibilities for fraud were really open, and there were many evidences of such possibilities for fraud. Voting was multi-day. The authorities were pushing hard for electronic and postal voting, which was completely new for us. We never used such methods before, and we understand that for the electronic voting and for postal voting, there are totally no methods and measures of public control. This voting, to our mind, served as a testing ground for developing new methods of falsification for future elections. We are sure that everyone should express their opinion in accordance with their conscience, taking care of the future of their children and grandchildren. Everyone is called upon to decide, is it possible to vote for the new edition of the Yeltsin's constitution? Our answer was no. We could not support such document. Our alternative is a program to mobilize Russia for a dynamic movement forward. It involves the nationalization of key industries, strategic and tactical planning, the development budget, the revival of science and culture, education and healthcare, the rejection of raising the retirement age, support for national enterprises, and range of other measures. The coronavirus pandemic and the psychosis sharply intensified the crisis in the global economy. And we understand that global capitalism is not able to solve the problems it generated. So a systemic crisis poses a mortal threat to the world. It can be resisted only by on the principles of socialism. So the communists are for the consolidation of such principles in our basic law. We support their confident and rigorous implementation.
So the alleged poisoning of Alex Navalny was given a lot of coverage in Western media. What impact did this have in Russia?
Well, we believe it didn't have any impact at all, because when this poisoning happened, it coincided with the protests in Belarus, in the Republic of Belarus. So I think the whole attention of the society, of the public, of the mass media was attracted to Belarus. Of course, the news with the Navalny poisoning or alleged poisoning, they appeared on our media, but currently they are totally out of the agenda. I think Navalny has completely fallen out of the political discourse right now. Of course, we can discuss whether there was the poisoning or there was no poisoning, but or we can discuss whether it was Novichok or it was not. But the word Novichok, it appeared in the West media. In Russian, neither specialists nor journalists never used this before. So for us, it was quite funny to find out, to learn that this substance is called Novichok from the British media, which happened after Salisbury. But had it been Novichok, I think, had it really been Novichok, I think Navalny would not be alive, because this substance is extremely poisonous, and there are several incidents when the scientists who were working on it in the end of 80s, one of the scientists was infected with it, and I think he died in 3 or 4 years after that, and his health was immediately damaged. But Navalny is still alive. He can give interviews to the media, so we really do not think this was a real poisoning. And also, we really do not believe that there was any involvement of the Russian state in it, because why would Putin have let him leave the country and go to Germany? If there was any kind of involvement of the Russian state, they would have made him stay in Russia, and they would insist on his medical treatment in the Russian medical facilities. That's it.
Yeah, I definitely think there was some kind of propaganda play on behalf of British media. So Britain's communists believe the US, Britain, EU, and NATO are gearing up for a new Cold War against China and also Russia. What is the analysis of Russia's communists?
You're true in your question when saying that this might be a kind of a new Cold War, because there are really shining indications of that. Because when the Soviet Union was destroyed, or as the bourgeois media say, collapsed, when independent Russia appeared, we had only several kilometers of border with NATO country. several, I don't remember how many kilometers, but maybe 70 kilometers in the north. This is the border of Russia with Norway. Now, right now, we have Baltic countries, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, NATO members. We have extremely hostile government and extremely NATO-friendly government, right-wing government in Ukraine. Now we have Georgian government, which also is saying that they want to become NATO members. We have Azerbaijan, which during the recent years became a close friend with another NATO member, Turkey. We have NATO bases surrounding our country. We also have the anti-missile system installed in Poland and in Turkey as well, US anti-missile system. All this indicates that they are surrounding us and coming closer to our borders. And of course, also the EU and Britain are involved. And it is obvious because the EU for us is the strongest supporter of everything which United States is doing. And Britain, despite this widely advertised Brexit, is on the same position, and they would never change their imperialist approach to our mind. Of course, Putin's government is trying to resist. Of course, they understand what's going on, and if you're not blind, you will see this. Of course, Russia is not as strong as the Soviet Union was, and it has much less opportunities, much less possibilities, it has more limited resources. But still, it is trying hard, and this is the game of strangely intertwined imperialist contradictions. And of course, in this game, Russia is not on the offensive. They are in defensive mode, but the situation is getting more and more dangerous developments as we see now. If we look at the situation in Belarus, for example, because in the United States they are shouting about the Russian interference in the elections, but what is happening in Belarus is an obvious interference of the EU countries, and also Britain, and more specifically Poland and Lithuania into the elections in Belarus. This is, and they are doing this to convert this country from a Russian-friendly to something very similar to Ukraine.
The 150th anniversary of Lenin's birth was this year. How was it celebrated in Russia and by the Komsomol?
Of course, this year was something new for us because it is such a great anniversary of Lenin, 150 years, and we had very limited choice of methods of celebration because we could not go in the streets, we could not arrange a massive, huge demonstration to celebrate his anniversary. But still, we did our best to do this, despite it was April, 22nd of April. The psychosis, the so-called quarantine, and all this. People were afraid to go out in the streets, but we were there. We were near the Lenin's monuments. We laid flowers to the monument. Unfortunately, we had to postpone the main party event dedicated to this anniversary. We were planning to hold a big international conference in Moscow. Firstly, we postponed it until October. As for now, we are planning to have it next April. Okay, it will be 151, but still we'll celebrate 150 years of his birthday. But we are absolutely sure that whatever happens, this conference will take place. But also in many regions, we try to do our best. And for example, in St. Petersburg, in Leningrad, we managed to squeeze in the small window when the authorities authorized us to have a big conference, and we organized a very big conference with the international online participation. It was a huge conference with the participation of 400 people. And our biggest scientists from St. Petersburg, many professors took place for studying Lenin's heritage. And also we had international section of the conference, by the way, with the participation of the General Secretary of the Communist Party of Britain, Comrade Robert Griffiths. And we are really grateful to him for finding time for contributing to the conference. And we really think that this conference was a real success. And also, when talking about the work in the social media, we also started several campaigns like Lenin Lives. Like when you are taking your photo or picture near Lenin's monument or the Book of Lenin and whatever, and posting it on social media. And I think this campaign was kind of really successful with the thousands of photos with this under this hashtag in the Russian social media VK. You know, we have our own social media. Facebook is not that popular in Russia. We have our own VK, it's called.
That sounds great. Yeah, it must have been such a shame, obviously, being in April. It was kind of at the start of, you know, the lockdown and stuff like that. So I hope that next April will be a better opportunity for you to properly celebrate. So my last question for you is, what will be the focus of the work of Russia's Komsomol in the coming period?
This period is this current year and maybe next year are so strange and so unusual for us. So we really cannot make any long distance plans. So we are planning only for the proximity, and if we are working in these conditions of this epidemic of COVID-19, we have started a campaign which is still going on. The campaign is called "We Do Not Leave Our People Alone," and it is designed to provide support to elderly people in the conditions of self-isolation, veterans of war, veterans of labor, veterans of the armed forces, veterans of the Communist Party. It is obvious that these people built a great country. They successfully fought against fascism, and when living in the Soviet Union, they managed to successfully defeat the outbreaks of cholera, smallpox, and stuff. And even now, despite their advanced years, they remain real fighters and mentors and assistants for many of the young people. So activists of Leninist Komsomol have already shown and continue to show that they are ready to help the delivering groceries, fresh newspapers, and necessary medicines. Support them just with a kind word. This is the least the Komsomol members can do for such comrades. This action is taking place throughout the country, and we are planning to continue it further from Kaliningrad to Vladivostok. And every day, dozens of members of Komsomol visit the elderly, deliver them the basic necessities. We have to set up headquarters in most regions to monitor the situation and to provide prompt assistance to the people. Comsomol members of many regions have opened special hotlines through which those in need can seek help, including even legal assistance. Our activists in many regions provide support not only to elderly people, but also to large families, single-parent families, as well as families with children with special needs. In the face of rising unemployment and rising food prices, this category of population has actually become on the verge of survival. The pandemic showed that the capitalist Russian state is not able to provide the population with basic personal protective equipment. In this regard, we managed to open several facilities for production of protective masks, and we conduct free distribution of them to the people. We are sure that together we are stronger than viruses. And in these conditions, when the bourgeois authorities have actually left citizens to their fate, only the comradely and mutual assistance can help.
Brilliant. It's great to hear such great work and ideas coming from young communists in Russia. I wish you all the best of luck and solidarity in your fight. So
thank you. We are also monitoring the work of YCL, and your campaign with food banks is also brilliant.
Thank you so much. So yeah, thank you so much, Roman, for taking the time to speak with us today.
You're welcome. I will always be at your service.
Great stuff. Thank you, Roman.
Greetings to all comrades of YCL.
Solidarity, comrade.